Hi, I'm Matt Artile. I'm the editor of BuzzFeed Philippines, and I live in New York City. So as a gay man, well, I am a gay man, first off. And it's interesting because a lot of my friends lately have sort of been leaning more into their queerness, sort of discovering that, oh yeah, there is a fluidity to sexuality and gender, and they've really been down to explore that. One of my friends recently, I've been thinking about this a lot. One of my friends realized that she was queer. She identifies as a woman, and she is attracted to more than just male-identified people. And so she asked me recently and said, does it get easier? Does coming out get easier? Does it get easier to say the words? Does it get easier to share, part of who you are to the people around you? And I said, wow, I am really lucky. I've only ever had to come out once. I never, like, if you look at me like right now, like, hi. Like, if you are, you're not, you're not picking up the right signals if you can't quite tell that I love men. They're awful, but I love men. Um, and so I told her, it's not, I can't quite speak to that. I have this strange privilege of just being so flamboyant, being effeminate, being like looking like I have gay face, honestly, and it's I have never had to come out more than once. And she said, well, "What do you mean you never had to come out more than once? Who was that person?" I said, "Well, I came out to my mother. I came out to my mother when I was, let's see, it was 2004. Yeah, 2004. I came out to my mother when it was 2004, the day after my 13th birthday. I grew up in Las Vegas after having immigrated from Manila in the Philippines, and I lived with my mother. And so she and I were very close, and she was always very supportive of who I was. And, when you have your sort of personal little, rainbow flags in, sort of trying to make a metaphor for like red flags of being gay, but, your rainbow flags when you're growing up, like when I told her, this is going on the internet and I'm proud to say it. I was very young. Like one of my first sort of mini coming outs to her was, I was like maybe what, 6 or 7 years old, and Oprah. We watched Oprah together, so that was a good sign. We watched Oprah, and it was sort of like her weird beach body episode. Like she rarely did that in her later Oprah show years, but she had one, and it was basically like, look at these fantastically fit humans, and there were these beautiful men on the television, and I realized I was getting hard, and I was so confused. I was like, well, that's weird. What is happening? And I'd always been very close with my mom, and I told her, I said, Mom, I have to tell you something. When I see really muscular men, my pee-pee gets hard. And she's just like, huh. And I really distinctly remembered her just being like, and how does that make you feel? And I was like, I don't know. It's weird. So it's just sort of like, I had always been in conversation with my mother about my sexuality. And then sort of like the formal official coming out, that ritual that we all have, or maybe don't have, but many folks do. It was the day after my 13th birthday. We were in the car on the way to my uncle's house, where my grandparents were visiting from San Francisco. And my grandparents were over there, and so we were on our way to the house for a little dinner. I just sort of realized I should tell her. I should really, really tell her. I can't keep this a secret from her. And I feel very lucky that I did feel comfortable enough to tell my mother. Not everybody has that kind of luxury to be able to tell the people that they love because of just whatever circumstances, whether it be religious or whatever kind of circumstance. And my mother's a very God-fearing woman. I was raised Roman Catholic, and she was very much of the Roman Catholic faith. And so when I told her, I was a little bit afraid that would be a challenge for her. And eventually, it was sort of a constant negotiation. But at the time, I was just very afraid. But I trusted my mother enough, and I loved her enough to know that no matter what happened, she would love me back. And so when I told her in the car, I just told her, Mom, I have to tell you something. I'm gay. And she was like, just driving, like, probably on a freeway, and I'm very, very lucky we didn't crash. She just said, I know. And it was such a relief to just sort of be on that same wavelength as my mother. And so we sort of unpacked that a little bit more, and she was like, mothers know. And I mean, the pee-pee story and Oprah, and when and getting hard, I'm sure that was a big clue. I mean, beyond that, there were other very, very much other signals. And so she had a very big heads up. So I told her, and I was like, why didn't you tell me? And she's like, that's something you figure out for yourself, right? And I'm like, I guess. That's really just the first step, is sort of identifying your own identity and, deciding what you want to call it, or deciding who you want to share that with, and deciding I definitely agree that your sexuality or your identity is not a choice. It's just who you are, and you discover that for yourself. But it's definitely a choice how you want to identify, and what name you want to call yourself, and who you want to share that part of your life with. And I was very lucky to have had that moment with my mother, in that, eventually it was a lot of conversations. We'd still go to church, and I'd challenge her about religion, and she'd challenge me about my own faith. And so it didn't stop there. It was definitely something that kept going. But that evening, the day after my 13th birthday, I thought I was, it's so cliche, but I thought I was a little bit reborn. It was just like a new kind of birthday for me. It was like a mark, a point in my life at which I could say, yes, me, kind of. So yeah, that was my official coming out. But then I never had to come out to anyone else. I just allowed really people to just assume, and I would mention, finding men attractive, or mentioning ex-boyfriends, or just just throughout my adult life, just moving through the world as if everybody knew. So for folks who maybe are not as lucky or as privileged to have such acceptance, I'm sorry. And I want you to know that there's folks out there who will love you and accept you for who you are. And I know that's so cliche, but it really is true. There are so many folks who have sat in the seat right now and sitting in other seats around the world, sort of telling these stories. And I know deep in my heart that they are expressing the same sentiment, that there's folks out there who will embrace you, who will hug you, will say that's okay, and say that it's wonderful, that you're beautiful, no matter who you are, no matter how you want to be called, no matter anything, that you are worthy of love, and that you are so fucking fantastic, that you have learned this about yourself, that you've investigated this and interrogated yourself, and just, it's such a process, and it doesn't get easier. And that's what I want to tell my friend. It doesn't get easier, I feel like, even though it was never a question for me. When she asked me, does it ever get easier coming out? And I say, I don't think it gets easier, but more and more, the more you say it, and the more that you say it for other people, no matter what they say, the more that you say it for yourself. That's what matters. That's what is really important. The more that you say it to yourself, the more that you sort of firm up your acknowledgement of who you are. And that could also change down the line. That could, that doesn't stay static. Just who we are as people, just who we are as human beings, we're always changing. And that's one part of us that will change, may not change. But the more that you understand that this is a conversation that you have with yourself first and foremost, that's the conversation that is the most important, that's the most fruitful. And if you're not able to come out to the folks around you, there are resources and people you can call, and just ways to work through this. And that stuff's not going to get easier either. But the more that you understand that there are things that you can do to have that conversation with yourself, I think that's the part that gets better.